Galway City Transport Project.
Thanks, Minister. Thanks, Ken Corley, for selecting this item, and thank you, Minister, for being present to listen to my contribution. First of all, I'd like to say, I've been 10 years a public representative now. Since my time on Galway City Council, I've been an ardent supporter, an advocate for the need for a outer bypass in Galway. Minister, you recently visited our city. You saw at first hand the traffic gridlock that we Galwegians experience on a daily basis. Journeys that should take 15 minutes travelling from the east of the city to the west of the city and onto Connemara are taking up to an hour and a half and 2 hours at a time to make. Your predecessor, Minister Varadkar, and your department carried out an assessment of all of the roads infrastructure projects that were proposed for the country, and the Galway City Outer Bypass ranked as the #1 top-ranking road project in terms of cost-benefit ratio. So the need for a city outer bypass is well established, and I support the requirement for that. Planning permission was granted for an original part of a route that was put forward. Ultimately, an appellant brought that to the High Court, the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court referred it to the European Court of Justice because the appellant argued that it compromised the integrity of an SAC. ECG came back to the Supreme Court, and as a result of the response it got, the Supreme Court ultimately refused permission. So, like so many, I awaited the publication of the new proposed route with great hope that this would finally address traffic gridlock in our city and would lift constraints that are currently hampering the development of business and economic development in our city, and indeed the quality of life for people living in our city. But I have to say that the routes that have been chosen now and that are being before the public at the moment are complete and utter madness, Minister. They're not feasible alternatives to the original plan for an outer bypass for a number of legitimate reasons. First of all, in terms of the cost. The original plan, the original budget, which was prepared at the time of the height of the economic boom, was in the region of 320 million. These new proposals will cost up to 750 million to develop. It will result in the destruction of up to 130 homes in the city, people's family homes. Some of those are amongst the most valuable properties in the city, hence the increased cost of the development. It will cause the destruction of a number of businesses in the city. It will have a very negative impact on some institutions, such as, for example, NUIG. New buildings which were developed there in recent times would have to be demolished. And I suppose most significantly, it's going to have a very negative impact on the world-famous Galway Racing Festival. It's an area, obviously, that you have an interest in with your tourism hat on, Minister. The Galway races are really the jewel in the crown of the Galway tourism product, and digging up the racecourse, which would be required under such these plans, would be akin to draining the canals of Venice, Minister, or boarding up the Colosseum in Rome for a week during the peak tourism season. The plans for this project were supposed to enhance the economic growth of the city, not to cripple it. Galway races are worth in excess of €60 million per annum to the local economy, and these plans would just have a detrimental effect on that. The refusal of the original route was due to the presence of bog cotton and the impact the road would have on a small area of limestone paving. I have, as we all do, have great respect and affection for our environmental heritage, but I have a problem with the prioritisation of bog cotton or limestone paving over people's lives, and we have to put people before plants and paving. The elephant in the room here, Minister, in all of this is the fact that the new routes also go through ecological sites of international importance, and if we're pursuing this course of action, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that this will ultimately end up before the courts again. So a halt needs to be put to this plan. We need to put the brakes on this plan. I'd ask you to use your offices to review the proposals that are currently before the public for their consideration and come back with something that will deliver a project, the much needed infrastructure, sooner and at a fraction of the cost that is currently being envisaged.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle, and I want to thank Deputy Walsh for the opportunity to address this issue this afternoon. And I want to acknowledge the concern and interest that he has in this matter. Deputy Walsh has raised this issue with me on a number of occasions, I had the opportunity to hear about the background to the project and the status of the project when I visited Galway with Deputy Walsh there a number of weeks ago. And since the latest development of this project, Deputy Walsh has raised the project with me, and he has articulated the concerns that he has in relation to it. And I'm glad to have the opportunity now to publicly respond back to what the Deputy has said there. As Deputy Walsh is aware, I have responsibility for the overall policy and funding in relation to our National Roads programme. The construction, improvement and maintenance of individual national roads is a matter for the National Roads Authority in conjunction with local authorities. Within its capital budget, the assessment and prioritisation of individual national roads projects is a matter for the National Roads Authority in accordance with Section 19 of the Roads Act. I am aware that Galway County Council, on its own behalf and on behalf of Galway City Council, is currently focused on addressing existing transportation issues in Galway City and surrounding areas. As part of that process, I understand that the Council initiated a public consultation to inform the public of the transportation options which have been developed to address the problems identified, the constraints identified to date, the implications of the EU Habitats Directive and the project programme. These options cover public transport, smarter travel and road elements. As indicated in the public consultation documents, the position of Galway City between Lough Corrib and Galway Bay, together with the presence of designated sites, presents significant constraints for developing new infrastructure, and the Council has, therefore, focused on considering all alternatives in order to minimise the impact on designated sites. The stated objective of this phase of the Council's work is to identify a suitable study area for the examination of alternative routes and transportation solutions, to identify key constraints within this study area, and to develop feasible route options and transportation solutions, and to carry out a systemic assessment of these options, leading to the selection of a preferred route corridor or transportation solution which will form the basis for the detailed design. Road options to connect the R336 on the west of the city to the existing N6 on the east have been identified in relation to the possible road component of the transport solution. 6 such options have been included in the public consultation process, and the Council has indicated that these are draft options subject to change in light of assessment. In this context, I understand that the purpose of the recent second consultation is threefold. First, to update the public on work to date. Second, to obtain input from the public on any additional significant constraints. And third, to offer the public an opportunity to propose further alternative options which had not previously been considered. The design team will examine the feasibility of such options and determine whether they merit inclusion in the final appraisal of options. I've also been informed that the design team are currently engaged in individual meetings with directly affected landowners and the general public to provide more detail on the various options under consideration. Submissions in respect of the route options can be submitted to the project office until the end of February 2015. The information received will be collated by the design team and used in the assessment of route options. I understand that the assessment process is due to be completed by the end of March of this year, and an emerging preferred route option will be identified. This emerging route corridor will subsequently be put on public display. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Walsh.
Yeah, thanks, Minister. As I said during my contribution, the new routes that are before the public for consultation at the moment also compromise the integrity of ecological sites of international importance. That's precisely the reason why the first plan was refused by the ECJ by the Supreme Court, having considered the advice of the ECJ. So in terms of these new routes, I am absolutely of the view that this will end up before the courts again. And what we need now is a solution to the gridlock in the city, and we need, as I say, the brakes to be put on this process. Extend the study area, look at other options outside the study area that don't have such a negative impact on people's lives, and also will result in something be delivered sooner and at a fraction of the cost to the Exchequer. Our expectation was that a variation to the original route would be considered by the NRA and the local authorities, and that an application would be made under a little used application structure known as IROPI, imperative reasons of overriding public interest. Clearly there's an imperative reason of overriding public interest here. That's well established traffic gridlock in the city. Unfortunately, those adjudicating on new plans decided otherwise. They have looked at routes closer to the city, as I say, that can deliver an option, but at a huge cost to the state. And you know, Minister, you've been very good to Galway in recent months, but I shudder to think what your reaction might be on the day that I approach your desk and asked you for €750 million to put in 16 kilometres or so of a ring road around Galway. Is that something that you would accept, or Minister, that funding is available to do this? But ultimately you must accept the point that this is going to end up again where it ended up previously, the High Court, the Supreme Court, and ultimately before the European Court of Justice for its deliberations on it. We need to put a halt to this, Minister. I'd ask you to use your offices, as I say, to get the NRA and the local authorities involved around the table again to look at alternative routes, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you again to Deputy Walsh for the points that he has made there. I absolutely understand the concerns that the Deputy has raised, and I acknowledge, as you've been good enough to say yourself, all of the tremendous progress that is being made in Galway at the moment in relation to many areas which matter to my own department, whether it be within transport, whether it be in tourism. My department has worked very hard to support the good work that is underway in relation to Galway City and County at the moment. As you yourself have acknowledged, I mean, there is support regarding the objective of what has been described there. That objective being to find a way to alleviate congestion that is growing increasingly severe. There is a process, as the Deputy has said himself, that is underway that does, I believe, allow up until the end of February for submissions to be made in relation to route options by the public and by other stakeholders. And I know what this does, Deputy, is that process will afford you the opportunity to put your input into it if you believe that's appropriate. But I think by raising this here on the floor of the Dáil, you're putting down a very clear marker regarding the concerns that you have in relation to this matter and the negative effect which you believe this project could have on the people that you represent and the wider city and county. So, Deputy, what I will await to do, this is a process that is underway that is being led by the local authority in the area. I've already outlined what my role is in relation to it, which is funding responsibility with respect to total road policy within our country, and then working to deliver funding for projects that are prioritised by the National Roads Authority. I do need to await the process reaching a conclusion there within Galway City and County, but I am acknowledging here the concerns that you have in relation to the matter, and I do hope this process can be used, Ceann Comhairle, to respond to matters that are clearly of legitimate concern to a large number of people within the city and beyond.
Thank you.